I'm just somebody that knows things about how the unconscious and the conscious work together. I know things about the motor cortex. There's somebody that told me they had pain in their back, and I think you should tell them to get out. Lots of people here have strange aches and pains. I don't know what it was. As I read through the things, I've done this a number of times, and they all have them in the same place. Think about that. Everybody seems to have a pain in the back. And then there's some people that have pains all over the place. Free-floating pain. So I wanted to start out this morning by doing a couple of things, because there's a couple of things that I think are real important. One is it will not help you to be stressed out while this is going on. I know some of you are already chatting away to yourself, yak, 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 yak. If you find yourself talking too much, just repeat the mantra, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up, shut the fuck up, and keep saying it faster and faster and faster and faster till you bore yourself into silence. I know in India they use much more interesting mantras than that. I find this one is highly effective. That to me, if you can't quiet on the inside, you'll have trouble listening on the outside, which is what I'm interested in your doing. The other thing is how many of you have done hypnosis before and know it? How many of you have not done hypnosis before as far as you know? Okay. Because I guarantee you've been in trances. And you know, you've been in an elevator and the doors opened and you stepped out and it wasn't your floor. You know, it was just the first time the doors opened. The light changes and you don't. You're sitting there reading something and somebody is calling your name over and over again and you don't even hear them. These are all altered states. That I know some of you have done altered states by virtue of taking drugs. But remember, it's not the drugs that alter your state, it's your body's reaction to them. And we are all altering our state all the time. The word hypnosis, I think, is in and of itself, especially nowadays. I've found out that in Edinburgh, I'm not supposed to actually do hypnosis in a theater, but I can do it in hotel conference rooms. Explain that to me. Which politician made up that law? If it's actually a theater and they have plays and other shows and stuff there, then you can't do hypnosis in the room. However, if it's a hotel conference room, then it's fine. Explain to me one room, one or the other, and how can they make a law against something they don't believe exists? This is the thing. They go, there is no such thing as hypnosis and you can't do it here. When I started out years ago, they always told me, they said, don't learn hypnosis, because I said I like to learn everything about everything I can. It's like, you know, if I was going to learn about driving a car, I was going to learn how the engine works, the drivetrain, and actually rebuild a whole car so that I understood it. Because I had a feeling someday I'd be going down the road, it might break. And I'd want to know the best I could about what to do about it, especially the way I drive. Because I have only two speeds, very, very fast and all out. When I was young, I don't drive so much anymore, especially in this country, because everybody's on the other side of the road. And I have a tendency to be forgetful about certain things. My wife is always calling me and going, did you put something on the stove? And I go, oh yeah, God, that was 4 hours ago. And I'll go in and there'll be this black spot where my cheese sandwich was supposed to be. But they're just hypnotic metaphors. Relax.
They're too close.
They're too close, huh? And that's what.
I'm hoping to learn something about this from you.
You are going to learn something about it from me. I'm just bringing up things to see what you guys didn't put on your lists.
It was on there.
The cheese sandwich was on the list?
No.
Can you remember you remember that it was there?
Not the cheese sandwich.
Not the cheese sandwich. Well, see, you're already remembering better. No, the other thing is that I have a funny belief which does not match anybody else's who comes from the field of psychology, which I don't. My background is primarily in physics. And I just got into this by accident. I was in college. I was staying in a house owned by a psychiatrist. I read all the books, and I couldn't find anything that you could do. Hundreds of them. Had books all over the house, things like abnormal behavior, which I could do pretty much all of that stuff. Things like the treatment of schizophrenics, although inside this 3-volume set, there was not a single thing that you could actually do other than prescribe drugs. And it seems to me that people who are hallucinating floridly really don't need drugs. They're pretty much there already. I mean, when I grew up in the 60s, if you took drugs, it was to hallucinate. It was to get high, and they were giving people drugs to try and get them to not hallucinate. People would end up having strange behaviors. Plus, they took all these crazy people and they put them in one room. Sound familiar? That's where I got the idea from. And then they just let them wander around and talk to each other. What?
I missed that one before. You said that a dozen times and I missed it.
See, I made it so easy this time.
Yeah, you did.
But in the training seminar, think about it. This was the trainer's training seminar. These people are supposed to know all this NLP, and I hear these people in the background talking about how they're tracking what I'm doing. And I start talking about giving a group sleeping pills. And then I start talking about working in a coma ward. And nobody got it. They all went, coma ward. And I went, yeah, coma ward. See, hi, how you doing?
I think
You're late.
I am. I kind of got lost. I went to a different street and I come over to this one.
You got lost, huh? You think you're lost now. Wait till this evening. The first couple of days, things may be a bit blurry. I guarantee you they will clear up as we get to the end. Some things will get clearer, but there are some things that you need to blur out. Now, some of you, by the way, I think are a bit obsessive. I read your lists, and that some of you even you wrote it down like it was a work schedule. Like, well, first I have to have anxiety. That's 9 to 10, and then from 10 to 11, I have to worry about stuff from my childhood and relive it just to make sure I can get the most out of all that unpleasantness. I've had many, many clients that tell me they think about stuff in the past and they can't stop thinking about it. Well, the trick is it's your brain. But when you don't think about stuff like that is when you think about something else. And also there's a couple of little tricks I'm going to teach you that turn certain things off and turn certain things around. That for me, I find that strange things happen. For example, each time I teach a group, there are little different things. There wasn't a single page that I read that didn't have the word fear on it repeatedly, And sometimes it was even used in a positive sense, It's like, I want to get rid of my fear of failure, right? And I mean, that's a really thing, that's like double worrying. Not only are you worrying about failing, but then you have fear about your worrying. It's a very complex process. It's like you guys have a lot of extra time. Because what I want you to consider is really twofold. One is, if you can get rid of the mishigas that was on your list, that's a Yiddish word for nonsense. That's very complicated nonsense, though, not just easy nonsense. It's complicated nonsense. It's not like that Bill Clinton stuff where, you just come out and lie, and when you get caught, you just lie some more. I love that. When they asked him at the hearings, they said, well, you said that that it is not the case that you had sex with this woman. And he goes, how could you possibly say that that's true? And he said, well, that depends on what you mean by the word is. What is the definition of is? And he was content with that. That's, and he got away with it. But politicians get away with a lot. But then they know how to wield power. But he didn't really fool anyone. Everybody knows. It's just that most people don't care. He's not the first president to have sex with somebody, I don't think. After all, remember the Kennedys were in the White House. At that time, it was just like the Playboy Mansion. Only, there's a little less action at the Playboy Mansion. Kennedy brothers did fine. I'm sure some of the politicians over here have sex. I'm not always quite sure with whom. Or what, yeah. I'll never forget the first time I came to London. I got up in the morning and I was staying in the Waldorf on the Strand, and I had a window that looked out on the Strand, and it was just absolutely lovely. And this guy came and knocked on the door, and he brought my breakfast in, and the newspaper was on the top, and it said MP found, and then I looked in there and it said, I read it, he was hanging from the ceiling, tied up in fishnet stockings with a banana up his ass, right? And he was dead, right? And they said sexual scandal. Right? So where I come from, we call that murder. We don't call that a sexual scandal. We call that murder. Once people are dead, you can do pretty much anything you want to them. The question was, did he die from this? And as far as I know, that bananas aren't really that lethal, but they don't really belong up your ass either. Some things go in the in hole and some things go out the out hole, and when you mix those things up, you're in trouble. It's like with Bill Clinton. I always wonder, because if Monica, had all this stuff on this dress that she took and put in a safety deposit box, normal dating behavior, don't you think? But she must have had a dress to wear out. So my question is, whose dress was this? Because I've found that in the end, politicians, sometimes the power makes them crazy. They get a little kinky. But as long as they're busy doing that stuff, I figure they're not blowing up places, which is good. That, I think, I don't think it's such a bad idea that I think presidents should be required to have a blowjob 3 or 4 times a day, all of them, just so they don't get tense, and end up doing something stupid, And the parliament would probably be not a bad idea either. They get wrapped up and they get tense and they start passing laws. We had to face something that was unavoidable and unpleasant. But the fact is you didn't have to make it worse. And most people would have, that when something big and horrendous is coming up that you have to fight your way through, then most people end up, making it much worse instead of making themselves went over to where their bosses were and made a social faux pas that they probably shouldn't have told me about. Because the truth is that the people they made the social faux pas is the group I come from. And but the thing is to me, it's not about whether or not you made mistakes. I can tell you, why you have problems. You were born. That's it. If you weren't born, you wouldn't have any problems. Now that you know why, you can forget about why. The question is, how do you turn it around in a new direction? So let me ask you to do one thing just before we start, because I know I could just by looking at you, I know you're pretty relaxed, but then you've been through this before, just thinking about it. You're in one of these green rooms, you're already trancing out. You realize that, 2 hours from now, you're going to enter the sea of trance. Oh, by the way, I think this is kind of cute. I went to the doctors in the U.S. I brought my wife, who had been very ill, into hospital and to see actually Lenny's brother, who's a doctor. And when I was there, he looked at me and he said, I think you should come back tomorrow. I'll reserve the afternoon. And he gave me all kinds of tests and all kinds of things. And he asked me, he said, have you not been sleeping well? And I said, well, I normally don't sleep that much. I said, but I really haven't hardly slept at all. I only used to sleep 2 or 3 hours a night. But I said, I haven't even been sleeping that recently. I said, I just, for some reason, go to sleep, I wake right back up. And he said, well, I want you to sleep more, he said, because it's affecting your health. And so he gave me these pills. And I didn't really look at it. I just took the prescription in and I got the pills. And when I got home, I looked at them. They're called a trance zone. Is that not a great name for a pill? I thought, trance zone. I'll have to try one of these. And boy, are they. I don't normally take sleeping pills and things like that. I don't even drink coffee. I'm too wired already. People are always going, would you like a cup of coffee? And I'd go, you don't want to see me on coffee. I'll have 1 cup now and then, but if I drink coffee like most people do, I have to go out and sand a few telephone poles down. I begin to become agitated. I begin to get as tense as you guys. Some of you are here. Some of you are got jaws that are just like got marbles in them. You got to relax. It's a hypnosis seminar, for Christ's sake. You can't be nervous here. It won't help. But I tell you, it really won't. You know, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be nervous, you know, be nervous at the right time. You know when to be nervous? Right. Be nervous in the ocean with no boat. Good time to be nervous. Right. That way you'll drown right away. None of that hesitating stuff. You'll get down under the water and it's over. None of that paddling around for hours looking for something. You know, there's always people that do really stupid things, and it always amazes me. I have a whole collection of where I've cut out articles out of the newspaper of some of the brilliant things. Thieves, a bank robber in San Francisco writes the note that he passes to the teller on his own deposit slip. Figured, you know, that it would look like normal behavior in the bank. He could get away with it, except that it had his address and his name on it. So when he got home, the FBI were there. They were having a beer, making themselves lunch in his house. When he came in, and he went, "How did you find me?" And they said, "Well, because you left your name and address." He forgot to take the note with him, took the money, and didn't take the note. I consider that very stupid behavior. I also consider this very stupid behavior. There's a guy who has a boat, and it's very, very dirty on the inside. So he decides he wants to wash it out. So before he does that, he decides that he needs to let the water have a place to go out. So he drills a hole in it. Right. And he was picked up by the Coast Guard just before he died. And the Coast Guard said, "Why didn't you bring the boat ashore and put it in dry dock or something?" It wasn't even that big of a boat. It was just a little sailboat. And he said, "Well, it seemed to me that there was plenty of water there to clean it with." And he didn't want to wait that long because it was sticky on the bottom. I guess that's what happens when you go fishing in a sailboat. You get all the fish guts and stuff, and he wanted to wash it out. Didn't wait till he got to shore, drilled a hole, and you can't imagine what happened. The boat sank. Right? Actually, the fiberglass ones don't actually sink. They just turn upside down so that you have the smooth, slippery side you can't hold on to. So he kind of just drifted away in his life vest. I'm surprised he didn't cut a hole in it to see if there was air. See, to me, most of the reason that I find over the years that people have difficulty is that they're doing something unnecessary. But it's become a habit. It's become as automatic as a handshake. Most of the fears that people have are learned behavior. Only two natural fears: falling and loud noises. That's it. Those are the only ones that are, are built in. All the rest you have to learn. And so some people learn to be afraid of things that are so complicated that, it's taken years to learn it, but it's still not useful. So the question is twofold. One, how do you learn something better? The reason why I want to know what it is you do want is because you have a machine already in you that can build problems. So if you don't build a machine inside that builds a better direction so that you take opportunity, if you see a 50-pound note laying on the ground, you want to pick it up and then ask whether or not it's dirty, right? Otherwise, it will end up in somebody else's hand. I'm always surprised. I walk all over London and New York and Chicago, and everywhere I go, I find money laying on the ground. And people walk right over it, right? And they don't have a built-in thing that goes, "Money somewhere, pick it up." Right? And if they do, they'll stop and look at it. I'll see it, and I'll look at them, and I'll walk over and pick it up. And they'll just be staring at it, and they'll go, "I saw it first." And I go, "Yes, and I took it first." Actually, I went in a bathroom in the airport in Houston, and when I walked into the little toilet stall in there, there was an envelope sitting on top of the toilet. Right? And I picked up the envelope and opened it, and it was full of $100 bills, that thick, right? And I thought, what could this possibly be doing in a bathroom, right? And then I heard a guy in the next stall, tearing the toilet apart. Right? And I looked down, and there was a big satchel there, and I thought, I think I just walked into the middle of a drug deal. So I thought, gee, what a great idea. So I took the money, and I walked out of the bathroom. And as I didn't want to get in serious trouble because, Lord knows it could be the DEA or something. So, I didn't want to get arrested for being a drug dealer when I wasn't one, but I didn't want to leave the money sitting there either. It's against my nature to do that. So as I walked along, there was one of those nice little things they have that says, give to the March of Dimes, help kids with multiple sclerosis and stuff. So I shoved the envelope inside the thing and walked back in the bathroom. And there was a guy coming out, and he looked very angry. He looked really angry, clutching this satchel. And as I walked by, I bumped into him, and I said, "Oh, excuse me." I said, "This is a great bathroom." I said, "They give money away in here." And this guy looked at me and he went, "They give money away?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just found a big envelope of it." And he went, "Where is the envelope?" And I said, "Oh, I gave it to charity." I said, "I don't take money if I didn't earn it." And he went, "You gave it to charity?" I said, "Yeah, you see that policeman over there?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "I gave it to him." And the guy went over and asked for it? A few minutes later, he had handcuffs on. Now, that falls in the category of stupid as far as I'm concerned. I shouldn't stick my nose in other people's business, but that's what my business is. Now, the thing that I want you to realize is that whenever you make changes that are going to really be beneficial for you, there's two characteristics to them. One, they will feel good. I know it's anti-therapeutic. Therapists believe that you have to feel really bad to change, but then look at them. Psychiatrists for years and years and years had the highest suicide rate. And how did they kill themselves? Ironically, with pills. They didn't jump off of bridges, they killed themselves with pills. Hey, how are you doing? Guess what? 9 out of 10 of you have on your list something about that what you want to get through is procrastinating. And now we have the trains doing it now. In San Francisco, every form of public transportation procrastinates. What I like is that they say that this morning the flights will not be leaving on time. Their time of departure is 7, but the plane will actually be leaving at 9. Now, how can its time of departure be 7 if it's leaving at 9? They have a way of doing that. They put you in the plane and make you sit there for 2 extra hours, even though you're only taking a 30-minute flight to LA. This is what happens when you put people in charge of things and they're not having the experience. It's like the people who decide to feed the homeless, and they feed them the kind of food that homeless don't want to eat. We do that in San Francisco all the time. We give them things like, big plates of beans, right? For people who have trouble finding bathrooms, giving them beans is not a good thing, and there's nothing worse than 200 guys, sitting in a hall, having just eaten beans and then having to listen to prayer, And this one minister said to me, he said, "Well, why don't you come down to the mission?" And when I went down to the mission, I couldn't believe how many, they had navy beans, they had refried beans, right? And they had loaves of white bread. And I thought, how do the refried beans fit with a loaf of white bread? That's, I guess, to sop it up with or something. And then they had bean soup, right? Soup with beans just floating in it. And I thought, oh, so they give these guys 5 different kinds of beans. I hope nobody lights a cigarette in here. Place could go up in a boom. Anyway, I tell you what I'd like you to do sometime today or early tomorrow morning. I want you to get a list of what you think you can actually change based on a couple of things, based on the things that we do here, because the first thing I want to do is teach you a little bit about relaxation. Now, I know some of you have done this before. You certainly have no trouble going into a trance. He was in one of the seminars I did over at where did they call that place?
Congress Center.
The Congress Center. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, trade union.
They always told me it was the PUC. TUC.
Trade union.
Oh, TUC, Congress Center. Those initials don't match. And it's got the most morose statue of any place I've ever been. Have you seen the statue that's in there? It's absolutely horrible. It's just this downtrodden, beaten person. If you want to be a good trade union, you should have big guys with muscles that look like they're going to punch you. Not guys that look like they just got run over by a forklift. It's all starving to death, I mean, it was a nice idea, but see, they were going, this is how horrible we're being treated, as opposed to, look out, because otherwise we're going to treat you this way. See, to me, you either move towards pleasure or you move away from pain. The trouble is if you move away from pain, for example, lots of people motivate themselves by waiting until the stress level goes up. See, they go, oh, I've got 2 weeks to do that. So instead of getting it done while they have time, so that they have lots of free time, what they do is they go, well, I'll put it off. So they wait a week and they go, God, I got 7 whole days. Right? And they go, I could probably get this done in 2 days. So they wait 5 days, and when they get, and there's only 2 days left, then they get a phone call. And their aunt says, I'm coming over and bringing the 5 kids. Right? And so then you have to go out and shop and buy food for all these extra people. You suddenly have all these extra tasks. So instead of having 2 days, you have a place now that's noisy and you can't get it done. So you go, suddenly you start going, God, I got to start on it now. I really do. But I got to do this first, and this first, and then I'll do it. I'll do it this afternoon. And then when you get home mid this afternoon, you start thinking about dinner. So you go, I'll make dinner and I'll do it this evening. Pretty soon now there's only 1 day left, right? And of course, that's the day that, you were supposed to go out and have copies of this made, And so what happens is you get really nervous. You go, I can make the copies this afternoon. There's an all-night place. I'll wait, and then you start waiting and until the tension gets to the point where you can't stand it. When I went to college, they used to dole out the work at the beginning of the quarter, and I used to write all the term papers the first week or two, and then I'd take off and go to Mexico. I'd come back, read the books, take the finals. And, even when I got my graduate degree, I had to give what they call a colloquium. It's a speech that you have to give about what your dissertation was about. I was late because I couldn't find the campus, because I didn't remember where it was. Now, most of the people that were at the college were still in the middle of finals while this was going on, and they were just freaking out. And they were going, oh, I have to write all these term papers. I have to study for all these finals at the same time. So they had enough stress that they could start working, but not enough time to do everything. And you see, when you use that as a motivation, then the unpleasant thing about it is then you have to go to your doctor and he goes, gee, your blood pressure is a little high, like way high. And you say, well, and they go, are you under any pressure? And they go, well, yes, all the time. Because in fact, people that do this, to get up in the morning, they fight a battle. They lay in bed and the alarm goes off, and they have one of those things you hit that gives you 10 more minutes of sleep. That's admitting you're a procrastinator, if you ask me. If not that, when they wake up, they feel the warmth of the sheets, and they say, I don't want to get up. And then they start threatening themselves. They go, if you don't get up, you'll be late. And you go, oh, but it feels so good to lay here. If you're late, you'll lose your job. If you come in the middle of the class, everybody will turn and look at you. You'll be embarrassed. And it goes on and on and on until you make it so unpleasant you have to get up, or else your body at the unconscious level makes it so you have to pee so bad you're forced to get up. Now, there's nothing fun about this. See, by the same token, there are lots of people that motivate themselves by making the idea of doing things more and more pleasant. Now, what I'm going to hope, because I know that lots of you had on there things about procrastinating, is that we can create sensations which are pleasant enough that you would be drawn to them. And I wanted to start by seeing if we can turn one feeling around, because I think if you can turn one feeling around, it'll begin to give you an idea about how to do this with lots of things. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to stop and think about on whatever your list was, whether you turned it in or not. Because some of you didn't, and those of you who didn't will find a way to give me one. Because it's not nice to make Richard mad when you're going to be in a deep trance for 3 days. That's like really asking for it, I go through the book, and some of you didn't give me a picture. There's a reason why I want the picture, right? And then the picture is because I memorize all of this stuff and I attach it to your face. So when I'm doing things, I do certain things for some people and certain things for another. If you're just a faceless person, I'm going to start giving you somebody else's changes. And you may discover that that's not as interesting as you think. I mean, so if there's somebody here who wants breast enlargement, some of you guys are going to be in deep trouble. You know, I'm going to look over and go, I don't recognize this one. This must be the one that wants the big breasts. Actually, she didn't want it. She wanted her intuitions to be better, but it got blurred out. So it just said, you know, that she wanted, you know, more and bigger tits. The rest of it got blurred in the fax machine. But I thought, breast enlargement, I can do that. I've done that before, hypnotically. And it's not really that difficult if you think about it. Women do it all the time when they get pregnant. Breasts get big, so they must be something you can affect. Lots of people go out and spend money and try to do this with a knife. And it never looks realistic. Excuse me. Knives are not an instrument of beauty. Everybody I've ever seen who had plastic surgery looked worse afterwards than you could possibly imagine. I work a lot sometimes with movie stars, and I'll tell you, you know, so I'll see them, and then I'll see them a year later, and they'll look absolutely hideous. They'll look like something out of a Frankenstein movie, you know, with a kind of a lizard look to it. And I'll say, what happened to you? And they said, oh, I just had a little snip cut here. Everybody in Hollywood's getting plastic surgery. It's gotten totally out of hand. Teenagers are like doing it, you know, chopping their nose off and getting breast enlargement, having their chin changed. And I mean, to me, you know, it's like if you want to change things, the place to change it is from inside. Because when you start feeling really good, because one of the big questions you have to answer here is how much pleasure can you stand? Because if you get rid of the mishigas, which is the complicated nonsense, and some of you had pages and pages and pages of it. Some of you had very vague goals that you really like. I'd like unlimited wealth. Well, who wouldn't? You know, but if you think having unlimited wealth is going to make you happy, you're dead wrong. It's just going to give you more to worry about. Because until you can enjoy what you have, you can't really enjoy more. And it's just that simple. That if you can't enjoy $1, then, you know, if you can't enjoy 100 pounds, and you're sure not going to be able to go out and enjoy 1,000,000 pounds, you know, it has to make it so that every bit is enjoyable and the process of acquiring it. Human beings do a lot of things that I consider to be totally ridiculous for fun. You realize people jump out of airplanes for fun? Think about it. It's not even broken or nothing. And they get up in the airplane. People walk across hot coals for fun. Not because they're running from a fire. Right? Because Tony tells them this will turn their fear into courage. Well, here's the thing. Tony said to me one time, he said, sometimes people don't get it. And I said, like me, I don't get it. I said, when I look at a big thing of hot coals, I think, you know, charcoal steak, maybe a little corn, something like that. And I also, when I went to the fire walk, I have to admit I was kind of mean because I threw a big steak on there. Something about the smell of burning flesh. And it'll make you make maybe a slightly different decision. If you look down at hot coals and say cool moss, well, then I'd say your perceptions are off a little bit. The fact that you can hypnotically make it so that you can cross hot coals, well, you know, you pick a thing up out of the fireplace all the time and throw it back in. I know this is possible, but when you look at that big pit of fire and you say, I can't do this, it's just like everything else. Tony assumed that if you were able to achieve one thing you couldn't do, that it would make you turn around and say, I can do anything. Because that's what it did with him. But unfortunately, not everybody generalizes quite that way. There are people that come up to me and tell me, I've done 55 firewalks. And I said, what, did you do the first 54 only halfway? I mean, what's the obsession here? Instead of turning their fear into courage, they turned their fear into compulsion. So that now they were still afraid to walk across the hot coals, but they did it anyway over and over and over again. See, to me, I saw this kind of stuff all through the human potential movement. I saw people hugging trees. You know, I tried everything. I saw people, you know, getting naked and pretending like they weren't. I mean, I had more fun. I went to Esalen Institute, and they told me, oh, you know, the whole group now is a Gestalt session. And I actually went as an editor. I was trying to get Fritz to finish his book. And I finally found the easy way to do that, by the way. He died. So I just went ahead and wrote it for him. People said, you know, Fritz got so clear in the end of his life. was actually in the afterlife, by the way. But I didn't mind. It was my job at the time. But when I walked in and I saw people talking to empty furniture, and they had told me that he worked with neurotic people, but I mean, this was way beyond neurosis. People were looking at empty furniture saying, "And you never loved me." And I went, "A love affair with a chair. That's good, really good." I've heard of, homosexuals, I've heard of people who are into bestiality, but furniturality, I mean, that's a whole new one for me. And what was weird is that the guy leading the group turned around and said, "What does he say to you?" And everybody in the room turned and looked at the empty chair. That scared me. Right? I looked over and there still was a lot more nothing in that chair than I had seen before. He actually got this guy to beat the crap out of an empty chair. That's going to make your life better, don't you think? Think of the formula. Hallucinate dead relatives, argue with them, and then attack empty furniture. So the rule of thumb for mental health is hallucinate, get angry, and attack your hallucination. This doesn't seem like it's going to make people have better lives. I'm a little more practical than that. I like to make it so that you end up really realizing that all change occurs at the chemical level. You can't get angry without changing your body chemistry. You can't be afraid without changing your body chemistry. These are not simple acts. They are very complex acts that you've learned to do over the years. You've learned to generalize from those 2 fears to lots of fears. Now, I know there was somebody in here that said they had a fear of public speaking. I'm just wondering whether or not, sometimes people who have fear of public speaking don't raise their hand. See? It's one of those things. Some years ago, there was a paranoid schizophrenic, and he was dying of AIDS, and he was a paranoid schizophrenic, and he was had a daughter, and the agencies were trying to figure out what to do with his little girl. And so they set up a meeting between all the different agencies in San Francisco. And they called me because I had been taking care of the little girl and asked, they said, "Is Tony there?" And I said, "No, Tony doesn't even know where I live." I said, "As far as I know, Tony is a bedridden AIDS patient and he's living in a little apartment." And they said, "Well, yes, but we went to the apartment, he's not there. We were supposed to have a meeting there with him, and he's late." And I said, "So what you're telling me is that 12 agencies told him ahead of time that you were going to converge on his apartment, and the paranoid schizophrenic didn't show up, and this surprises you?" I said, "You guys really are professionals, professional idiots. That you wouldn't expect a paranoid schizophrenic to be, a graceful host." It's probably the only time he'd been out of that apartment in 2 years. He probably crawled out, for God's sake. That's why they call them paranoid schizophrenics. Over the years, I've had some absolutely wonderful ones. I've had one where people climb off the TV and follow them around. That'd make me paranoid too, wouldn't it you? I mean, I just think about the fact that you're watching TV and somebody hops out and follows you around and starts nagging, which was his thing. For example, he lived in the U.S. We have a lot of these preachers on television in the U.S. The U.S. hasn't got a history of religion like this country has, where some king just kicked out all the, said all Catholics out, and we're just going to make our own religion, and I'm in charge. He was, and that was all about the fact that he had bought pontiffs. He bought get out of free sin cards, and I sort of like the idea myself. You can buy ahead of time. If you think you're going to do something really bad, you buy a couple of these things. And the Pope sold it to him, and then he wouldn't let him use them for, he said, "Look, no more wives for you." And they didn't know enough about genetics to know that he was the problem. They really wanted to have a male heir, then what he needed to do was to get somebody else to do it for him. Too many Y chromosomes. To me, that, the idea, it's like when they talked about racial purity during that Bosnian thing, these are not people who have studied genetics. It's kind of like the story of Noah's Ark, where, Noah collected, together one family and 2 of each animal, like to repopulate the earth. I mean, this is not the work of a geneticist. That we all know that the bigger the gene pool, the better. That actually, as we mix things together, they work out better. It's one of the reasons I like London. There's all people from all different kinds of walks of life and different racial things and stuff, all running around in the same trance. It's I like it. You go into an Indian restaurant and there are people from all different places. There'll be Japanese in there, and there'll be Americans, and there'll be English. English's favorite food is Indian food, and I think that's great. But of course, they used to, as they say, we used to own that. Guys used to own everything. Used to say the sun never sets on the empire. Well, guess what? It set. You discover it's a lot better to just hold to your own rather than having to support the entire world. Because after all, you have all the valuable stuff in the British Museum anyway. There's probably nothing left out there. I went in the British Museum and I couldn't believe the stuff you guys swiped. God, it was like, it's like you guys sitting in one hand reading the 10 Commandments, and skipping over that shall not steal one, Thou shalt not make steel? No. How does that translate? I can't quite get that one. Oh, by the way, take the top off the Parthenon and move it over here.
We just found it, Richard.
Yeah, I know you just found it laying around. When I used to stay in a hotel over by the Thames, and behind it was a 60, 70-foot monolith that then the sign says, and the front of it, that they took this from the front of the library in Alexandria, and that it was a gift. I like that one. You appoint a governor of a country you conquer, and he gives you stuff. That's good. We have a name for that too. Lying. That's the name of that. But this big monolith is huge. I mean, it had to have been an act of God to move this thing and prop it up. And of course, they couldn't take the real Sphinx only because they didn't have a big enough boat. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have. But they built two big bronze things to hold it up, and I kept looking at it and see. I thought it was a replica. Silly me. I thought they'd look at this thing, they'd take some pictures of it and build one just like it. It would be easier than swiping one. And as it turns out, where's the other one? Because there was one inside of either door in front of the library. The other one is in Central Park in New York. Like, we really need an Egyptian monument there. Now, I can't imagine how much money was spent. They said, look, somebody made a deal and said, look, you take the one on the left side, I'll take the one on the right side. You put one on the Thames, because you really need an Egyptian monument on the Thames, I mean, what would the Thames be without a big 60, 70-foot Egyptian monument? And of course, you still haven't stopped. Now you built the world's biggest Ferris wheel. My kids have just come over to visit me, and they went, oh, we want to see the Ferris wheel. And I said, well, just look at this little tiny wheel that I have right here, and then in your mind, make it really big. And that's what it is. And then think of like $1 billion falling into the river and floating away. But to me, they're constantly doing stuff like that. I keep thinking about the horrendous amount of waste in the U.S. We spend money on things like, for example, they decided to build 2 more Trident submarines. We don't even have an enemy left anymore. Our enemy now is all moved, by the way, to the U.S. and everywhere else. Half of Russia moved over there. You can always tell them because they're always in sweatpants with loafers. That's the new Russian uniform. And they're driving all the taxis, and they are running businesses all over the place. They're apparently the new mafia of the world. It's that, like the old one was going out of business, I guess. So they moved in and took over. Gambling, prostitution, all of those things that, we just can't seem to get rid of. And yet governments spend billions and billions of dollars. I figured out if they spent the budget in the U.S. trying to cure diseases and feed hungry people, and not just in the U.S., worldwide, we could probably do an excellent job with the budget that we spend trying to keep drugs out of the country unsuccessfully. It'd be one thing if it even worked remotely, but all it does is drive the price up, and the amount that comes in. I figured out with the budget they spend in the U.S. that I personally could go out and buy more drugs than they happen to impound, and I could probably get them a better price, that in a year they impounded something like 3 million tons of cocaine, but in order to do it, they paid more than you would pay for cocaine if you bought it on the street cut. You know, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I think that the government has to stop at some point wasting money on these things and start focusing on things that are worthwhile. To me, if you focus on your fears, if you think about the things you're afraid of, if you think, for example, I know one of the things that I found lovely is that they found out that when people go and have their heart and their blood pressure checked, their blood pressure goes way up, right? So that they ended up giving blood pressure medicine to all these people, and then they ended up almost dying from it because they didn't need it. Because it's only when were having their blood pressure checked, they get so tense while they were doing it, that what would happen is that when they would relax and take the blood pressure medicine, their blood pressure would drop down so low that they would start to pass out. You know, you can have terrible things happen. And that they didn't realize that, especially when doctors say to you things like that, they go and put stickers on your chest with these wires going to this thing going, did it, like this, and they go, let me check your heart. That sort of sounds like something's wrong with it already, you know? And you sit there and it goes, dun, 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 dun. And they found out that when they were checking people's heart, that, you know, that a lot of the stuff they can find, because they can find when it makes sounds that it shouldn't make. Of course, they can listen and find that out too, but they have other machines. They give you EEGs with paper that comes off, and they look at that paper and look at you out of the corner of their eye, and they go, oh. You know, that's enough to give you a fucking heart attack right there. See, I like to do things like when they put on those monitors, I've done yoga for years and years and years. I go into as altered a state as I can, and I slow my heart down. I can get it down sometimes to 8, 12 beats a minute, right? And then I can quiet it so that it barely is beating loudly, you know, and they start like doing this with your pulse, right? And the heart monitor is going like this, bleep, 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 bleep. And they go, something is, I love this, great hypnotic command while someone's in a trance. Something is wrong with your heart. And I go, yes, sir, I can do that. But better we use your heart instead. Now, what I want to do is to try something. So you have a fear of getting up in front of an audience and talking.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
But you can sit here and you're fine.
Yeah, reasonable, yeah, fine, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, don't you think? Not. It's just a different chair. Then this chair is no different than that one, really. And if you were standing here next to me, though, you would be afraid?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Well, definitely. Yeah.
Well, is it probably or definitely? Because I'm going to make you do it in a few minutes.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They didn't warn you, I'm a no fuck around kind of guy. You know, I'm the one that drags the guy with the elevator phobia into the elevator, kicking and biting all the way, just to make sure that he's not lying to me about it. See, but before you do, let me ask you to do something. Stop and think of the last time you had to get up in front of a group and you got afraid. Just close your eyes, see what you saw at the time. Okay? Until you begin to feel the fear. Tell me, where does it start in your body? Right there? Okay, keep doing it. I didn't tell you to stop. You'll know when I want you to stop. It'll be easy. Now, as you double the size of the picture, so you really can get some of this fear back, might as well do it right for the last time. Now, what I want you to do is to tell me, where does it move when it goes from that center place? How does it move from your body? Does it go up? Does it go down?
Sort of, it gets stronger but stays there.
It starts here, and then does it move up here?
Yeah,
Right.
Moving up a little bit now.
You do it pretty good, by the way, I have to tell you. It's a doubling the size of that image always helps. There's something, the bigger the pictures, you know, the more you respond to them. That's why if you're making great big pictures of terrible things, make them really small and then turn them all the way to white and they won't bother you so much. But before you do that, let me ask you, so it moves up to your chest, right? Okay, and then what happens? How do you stay afraid? Now, because if it just stayed in one place, it would habituate the nerves and you wouldn't be able to feel it. So typically what it has to do is it has to move. It either rolls forward, it rolls backwards, it rolls around this way, it rolls around that way. Sometimes it just moves in a circle this way. You can do it any way you want. You know, whatever way you've learned to scare the hell out of yourself, You know, otherwise you would start having fear and you'd forget about it.
Yeah. It is rolling.
It is rolling. Yeah, I know, I've done this before.
Yeah.
It's not my first time, you know. It's like, when I did it my first time, I just tried it with individual clients and stuff. And what happened is I found out that I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I thought, what the hell, I'll put them all in one room. And they said, group therapy? I said, no, group therapy, you go around and do different things. I found out that, you know, you can take one person and suddenly other people will begin to try the same things, especially if while I'm talking, I'm doing something else. See, because like this one here, guy's already going. He's sitting too close to me. See, his mind is going down, is going, nope, it's not time to go into a trance yet. Don't get sleepy. Tried. Some of them have been around me before. They realize that I'm nothing but a big tranceoid. I'm kind of like one of those trance zone pills myself. I just spin around and pretty soon I build a big whirlpool and everybody just comes down with me. Traditional hypnotists all try to stay out of trance, you know, while they hypnotize people. They do things like they stare at your forehead, right, so that they won't go into a trance, like that's a bad thing. I use the other approach. I just look at people and then I go, let's go together. And then I just start altering my state and breathing at the same rate they are, and then pretty soon, feeling more relaxed already, aren't you? That's right, you can close your eyes, it's okay. Anytime you feel like closing your eyes, it's okay. I don't mind, it's just that when your mind is ready to do important things, you know what's on your wish list and you know what needs to be changed on the inside. Because it's not that outside stuff you kept talking about. It wasn't that, that you need $1 million. First you have to learn to be really happy without it, and then it's really easy to make $1 million. It's, when you don't need it, then it's really easy to get there because your mind is clear. Somebody wrote a line which I'm going to repeat over and over again. They said they wanted to do things out of fascination rather than desperation. And I thought that was a really elegant way of putting it. That when you wait till the last minute and you desperately force yourself to do things so that when it's already too late, then it's a struggle. When I ask you in a few minutes to come up here, right, if you just came up here and tried to get out of your fear, it will be too late. The trick is to be able to take your fear and to turn it around. Which way was it spinning, by the way?
This way. Forwards and round. Yeah.
So like over the top like this?
Yeah.
Okay, now I want you to try something. I want you to keep thinking about the event, right? Only while you do, I want you to try something physical. Because to me, the thing we have to change in the end is your body chemistry. Your body learned that it could keep spinning this around and it could keep fear moving in this way. Now, so that you understand physically what I want you to do, it starts here, moves up, and spins this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to try something a little different. What I want you to do is I want you to just think about your forehead, and I want you to pull down your consciousness to that spinning fear, and I want you to just push it out in front of you and turn it upside down so that it spins in the opposite direction.
Right.
Got it? Now keep spinning it. Now when it spins in the opposite direction, it feels different, doesn't it? Now keep spinning it, because you see what we want to do is make it so that it lasts this way. The more you spin a part body sensation, eventually it will begin to spread throughout your body. Because unlike the desire that Tony had to take fear and turn it into courage, well, you see, if you have to have courage, then you have to be afraid, because courage is to overcome fear. When you really get over a fear, it turns into curiosity. So if you keep spinning this and spinning this and spinning it, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to wonder what it's like to come up here and turn around and just talk to people. It's not going to be something that makes it spin forward, but in fact, we're going to put a new spin on it. Because what you're doing now is learning. It's something that you're all going to do. you're going to find an easy solution to what seemed a difficult problem. We could go back into the ideology and find out what school teacher taught you to be afraid. You probably were daydreaming in class, and they went out and they called your name and they went, "Red to nose, come up here in front of the class and show us all how to do this problem," when you didn't even know what the subject was. And you were nervous and you got up there and she said, "Now that you feel totally nervous, turn and face the audience," thereby anchoring fear to the faces of lots of people. And then over the years, you can build these things up to the point where they become traumatic. But guess what? If you can learn it in an instant, you can learn something new in an instant as well. Because if you keep spinning this feeling, spin it faster. And don't let it fade, spin it even faster still. There you go. Now, put a little tingling in with it. And think of a time when you really expected something wonderful to happen. Do you remember the first time you saw a pair of naked breasts? And it was better than you expected, right? And I'm not talking about when you were a baby either. I'm talking post-pubescent. Now, if you take that feeling and keep spinning it with the other one, there's then going to be something that you're going to want to see in a new way. Because the faster you can learn things, the longer they'll last. And it's not how meaningful things are, but it's how good they make you feel. If you just take this good feeling, you don't have to then get up in front of the audience and stare at everyone's breasts. But you just take the good feeling that goes with it and you double the sensation. The conscious mind understands addition. It knows that 2 + 1 is 3. But it's the unconscious mind that does multiplication. When you go 5 times 5, bang, 25 comes out of nowhere. So if you take the feeling and double it, and double it, and spin it, and breathe in through your nose, though, it will help you. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Right? That way you inhale differently than you exhale. You have to be careful what you take in and what you put out. Because if you keep this feeling spinning, then I want you to begin to talk to yourself differently. All of you. Because there's far too much internal dialogue in this room. It's noisy as hell in here. Guys, forget, I can hear this stuff. Pretty soon you will be too. If you're quiet inside of your head, you can listen to what's going on. And you'd be surprised how much noise there is. It's just vibrations on the cortex. There's no reason why vibrations don't create vibrations somewhere else. They're always telling me these things are extrasensory. And I say, look, at one point, accessing cues were. When I started 30 years ago, I pointed out the fact that people did something so subtle as go, let's see. Right? And all of psychology had missed that. Where the hell were they? They were on the inside going, well, according to the works of sick man Freud. And he was a sick man too. Boy, I'll tell you, I read Freud's work and boy, that stuff is disgusting. You want to sleep with your mother? Excuse me. Even animals know better than that. Not Freud, though. Freud's going, that's the basis of all of our problems is the repression. And I said, yeah, the basis of your problems were too much cocaine, and a pretty big self-image that wasn't really that right. He said, everybody's problems are sexual problems. Yes, sick man. Yes, sick man. Was it that people called you sick man for years and years? Hey, sick man, how you doing? He says, well, yes, and I know women have problems because of penis envy. And I would say that depends upon the penis. And it's not really the penis they want to envy. Sometimes they want to chop the motherfuckers off. Let's go the full gamut, sick man. We could make this whole thing of life perverted, or we can make it easy. And me, I'm the guy looking for the easy way. If you create fear and hold on to it one way, if you do it the other way. Now, let me do something. I'm going to ask you to just stand up. Come here. Stand up. Keep the feeling spinning in the new direction. Right? You don't have to close your eyes. You can open your eyes. Just keep the feeling spinning, not this way, but that way. Right? And then begin to ask yourself, because if you turn around and you look at this audience and you can remain at ease, right? Does the other feeling feel better? Right? Well, come on up here and then just look at the people and see if you can keep the good feeling going. Don't hesitate so much, though, okay?
All right. Okay.
Pretty easy. Say hello.
Hello, folks. How are you doing?
He looks terrified, doesn't he? And you know what they used to call brief therapy? 10 sessions. Okay, to me I see the same client 10 times, yawn, I don't think so. Okay, so you feel better, right?
Yeah, I feel
okay,
better.
but it's not good enough.
Yeah, not good enough. It could be perfect. It could be.
No anal retentive is happy with anything. That's right. Of course it's not good enough, because since you haven't done it for years, there are things you have to learn about. You have to learn how to feel grounded, for example. You have to feel like that. If you put one foot in front of the other a little bit and turn that other foot sideways a little bit so that you feel solid, so you have a little balance. That way, if you keep your feet still and you turn this way, it'll just kind of cocks your hip and makes you feel like you're going to leap on the audience. I love that feeling. I look at them and I go, just wait, just you guys wait. Right. So now, take the feeling, and while it's spinning forward, let me ask you to do something. I want you to close your eyes for just a minute, and I want you to think of something that you really enjoy. Is there a time that you have a really good sense of humor?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know when that is?
Yep. Yeah, I do.
What circumstances? Like you don't make crack jokes during sex, right?
No.
Good. That's not a good time. I found that out.
Normally somebody else does.
You're right on the right place now. So all I wanted was a little wit. You seem to have done that pretty well. You see now, you made all these people laugh. Doesn't that feel good?
That feels very good. Yeah.
Feels good. Now, I want you to just hold on to that feeling, that good feeling, and I want you to spin that around with the other one, right? Because what I want you to do is to start to have something a little different than what you had before. Before, you had something where you avoided something. Have you ever really craved anything?
Yeah.
No, yeah, good. Glad that came. I'm glad that came to mind quickly. Now, you know the feeling of craving something itself, right? Now, I want you to just take that feeling when you really crave something. Where does it start?
For me, there.
Start for there. Okay. All right. Let the craving start. Let it build up, and then let the other two feelings that you've already spinning. Your spinning goes this way, round and round, and let the craving come up. And just inundate yourself with a craving for this feeling. Little sense of humor, right? And while you're doing this, let me ask you, do you feel afraid?
No.
So you were lying about this fear then.
I don't know.
All my clients, they waste my time. They lie to me about this. I come on, I ask them about these things, and they go, oh yeah, I had that problem 2 minutes ago. Right. Okay, tell the people goodbye and go sit back down.
Thank you very much, folks.
So let me ask you now, when you think about doing things in the future, there'll be places where it would be useful. Because if you can speak to groups of people, you can always make more money. You know, you can do business meetings, there's all kinds of stuff you can do. Group sales pitches, otherwise you have to sell everything to one person at a time. It's such a drag. You know, in the US, they get all the potential condo buyers, they lock them up in the same place, right? And they force them to listen to the sales pitch in exchange for a vacation to Las Vegas, which turns out to be a bus trip worth about $7. Not very honest, but while they have them there, they still have them locked. These preachers go on TV and talk to millions of people collecting money for God. You would think God would be able to make his own money, don't you think? If he's omnipotent, he should be able to just mint his own coin. You know, why he would want these guys from America, from Arkansas or Texas, you know. Anyway, so when you take the feeling and you began to spin around the new feeling, okay, and it felt better, right? Now, the truth is with any feeling, in order to maintain it, so if you have a fear of failure, right, in order to do that, it's an activity. See, to me, it's not that things have a psychological basis. It's not that there was, see, if I begin to try and find out why you have a fear of audiences, you know, is this some deep hidden thing about you wanting to sleep with your mother or something? Or the Queen Mother? You know? Fascination, not desperation. Fascination, not desperation. I think the impressive thing about her is that was the thing that I heard about an interview that somebody did, one of these newspaper reporters, was went and talked to her at some flower show or something, and he said, you know, it's nice to see you out and about. We don't see you out that much. And she said, well, she said, everybody says the traffic in London is terrible. And she said, but I never see it. And of course, they block everything off everywhere she goes. So of course, there's no fucking traffic. I remember one time I was teaching a seminar, and suddenly all these police came and lined barriers up on the side of the road. They blocked up all the traffic. And I said, what the hell is going on? We couldn't even cross the street. And the policeman says to me, he said, the Queen Mom is out driving. She's going to drive to Selfridges. So they're blocking the way all the way from where she lives to Selfridges. You know, I think that'd be pretty nice. I wish they did that for me. You know, I don't even have a car, and I wish they did that for me. They just blocked off everywhere, and, you know, then I would be sure to get the first taxi along, except there wouldn't be any. It's kind of like it was during that oil crisis. That was the shortest oil crisis I ever saw. I mean, we had an oil crisis in the U.S. that went on for years, you know, and then suddenly when the price got high enough, there was no shortage of oil. Funny how that works. Pretty soon we're not going to use oil in cars, though. That some clever guy figured out how to make the ultimate battery. And it's such a smart idea, and it's so simple. For 20 years, they've had electricity going around a superconductor at Texas University. They found out that the laws of physics change at a certain temperature. That whenever you have electricity in wire, it always dissipates some of it off as heat. And they found out if you froze it down to, you know, the temperature of liquid nitrogen, suddenly that law doesn't apply anymore. And this has been going around infinitely. So on this wire, electricity has been going round and round and round for 20 years. And the only time they lose any is when they measure it, because that always takes some. But, you know, they measured how much measuring takes, and so far the only electricity they've lost is how much it takes to measure it. Now, I don't know how they measured how much it takes to measure it, but these scientists have far too much time on their hands. That's all I can say. Well, some bright guy started thinking, and he said, what if we put a whole fucking lot of electricity in one of these things? Could we take it off when we wanted to? And he built a device that's about the size of a washing machine. And you can put it in a power plant and store enough electricity inside of this thing. It's got a casing of liquid nitrogen, and it stores enough electricity that if the power plant went down for 3 days, you could light up a city the size of London for 3 days. And then somebody said, gee, we could make little tiny ones like this big and stick them in cars. We just have to be careful about getting in accidents with liquid nitrogen. It's nasty stuff. So we might have to put a really good case on the battery, you know. But see, I've always thought that it's silly that they make cars out of heavy metal. I always thought they should make them out of the same thing that Nerf balls are made out of. You guys know what a Nerf ball is? One of those little sponge footballs, right? Nobody ever gets hurt with one of those. They throw it and you hit you right in the head and nothing, you know. That's why they give them to little kids, you know. I have a dog about this big, and she loves Nerf balls, you know, and I take her out in the park, and she goes around and steals children's toys. But she figured toys are for dogs. Children are always going to outgrow them. And she likes to bury them places and then let people try and find them. But I was sitting there one day, and there were two kids, and they had like a box full of Nerf balls, and they were throwing them at each other. And suddenly I got the vision of people going down the road in Nerf balls. See, then we could take our aggressions out all the time. We could just slam into people, and it wouldn't even be like bumper cars. You wouldn't feel a thing. They'd just spin around, you know. And if we put the wheels so they turned in every direction, they'd never turn over, just like, you know, swivel skates like they have on a thing in a supermarket, you know, shopping cart, a big shopping cart with Nerf balls and one of these batteries, and down the road we'll go. There will be people dying on the highways. See, it wasn't really a smart idea to make one road with a white line down the middle. Anyway, I've got, what's that's got to look to people to outer space? They probably call this the suicide planet. Because we get in big metal things and go as fast as we can in opposite directions, and then we're shocked when they hit each other. Big surprise. See, to me, I'm not surprised at all. If having talked to people about the intimate insides of their minds for 30 years, I'm afraid every time I go on the road, because those people are talking to themselves, making pictures, thinking about things, worrying about shit. They're not watching the fucking road. If it wasn't for the fact that unconsciously people do things better than they do consciously, we'd all be dead. But somehow or other, have you ever been driving down the road and then suddenly you realize you haven't paid attention for 100 miles? And but somehow or other you drove automatically? That's the way your unconscious runs your heart, too. That's a good thing. It's only when you use your conscious mind to begin to steer it in a direction you don't want to go. The more you worry about fear, the more fear you'll have. You see, as soon as you just start making a new feeling in the same place. Now, here's the trippy part. In terms of getting things to generalize to other places, stop, and I want you to think about another time where you had to do public speaking and you were afraid. And when you think about it now, what happens?
Doesn't seem as bad.
It doesn't seem as bad. Well, it's not now. That's why. Now, the thing is if you start to think about places in the future that normally would have been totally out of the question for you, when you think about them now, how does it feel?
Should be possible.
Should be possible, yeah.
Or will be possible.
It will be possible. But does it seem like it's going to be fun? See, the problem is you're still not moving towards pleasure because you haven't practiced it enough. You grew up in a society, especially the English. Jesus, people, here, it's like, keep a stiff upper lip. What for? Excuse me. You know, the war is over. You know, that was a good time to have a stiff upper lip. It'd probably been a lot better if you had a helmet, but stiff upper lip if you don't have a helmet. You know, it's like my grandfather said to me when I told him 10 years ago I was coming to London, and I stopped in New Jersey to see him, and he's not alive anymore, but, you know, he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day, so he died at the age of 107. All the doctors, he was a real polarity responder. As he was proud of saying, he said, I buried 3 of my doctors. And he said, and now they're afraid to work, they're afraid to be my physician. He said they were clean living people. They didn't smoke cigars, didn't smoke cigarettes, they didn't drink. It's no wonder they died young. You know, and I said, well, that's a good philosophy. He also died in the middle of a sentence, which I think is the way to die. You're going to do none of this long, drawn out, protracted illness stuff. He was at the table and he was eating stuff. He didn't have any teeth left, you know, and he was kind of had a little Alzheimer's going, you know, so he didn't really worry about the past much. Couldn't remember much about it. In fact, he told me not to come to London. He said, oh, you don't want to go there? The whole place is bombed out. I was just there. And I said, well, actually, that was quite a while ago. He goes, yeah, but he said, the place is a mess. You know, he says, you want to go somewhere nice? He said, go to Washington, D.C. He said, the place is really clean, full of monuments, everything's nice. And I said, well, yeah, they got half the money of all the people in the country, and they squander it decorating the city, not curing diseases. I mean, because like what we really need is statues of dead people that I've never heard of. I mean, you know, you guys are possessed with this statue thing over here. I got to talk to you guys about this. You guys have a statue of George Washington here. Excuse me, wasn't he a traitor for you guys? Shouldn't he be a bad guy? But over there's a big statue of George Washington, you know. Remember, he liberated our country when it wasn't our country, it was your country. And, he started a big uprising. He imprisoned, generals. And then he started swapping. I love this. He swapped guys like, General Cornwall for one of our diplomats that got the Brits had the ships, and you caught an American ship, and it just happened to have the president of the Continental Congress in it. So you guys put him in a bloody tower, right, and made him sit there. And, for 2 years he sat there, and then we started playing like a barter game. I'll give you this general for that politician. Makes a lot of sense. We did that with the Russians too. Like when our spies would get caught, we'd trade them their spies back. Isn't that kind of admitting things to me? Oh no, we don't have any spies, but we'll trade you one of ours for yours. That's as good as there is no such thing as hypnosis, and you better not do it. That's what I was told, because I was told hypnosis only treats the symptom. And I went, that's good, isn't it? They went, no, that's not good. You don't understand, Richard. And I said, well, I thought we wanted to treat the symptom. And they said, yes, but if you suppress the symptom, it will come out somewhere else. So what happens is you end up suppressing all of this fear. It ends up coming out in erections. Prolonged erections. When you're having sex, even with somebody else.
Life is looking up now.
And the more you engage in doing things like public speaking and all of that kind of stuff, it's a side effect of the whole thing. You know, I mean, sometimes you start having sex, you just can't stop for hours and hours. It's, you know, I have clients call up and complain bitterly about it, you know. But of course their wives call up and say, could we send you an extra check? And I tell you, no, it's a payment in and of itself. It's nice to have people be happy. This English teacher in college kept telling me, he said, well, you know, he said, if you don't have good handwriting and you don't spell well, everybody will think you're stupid. And I said, well, if you're not stupid, then you'll hire somebody who does have good handwriting and spells well. Pay him a couple bucks an hour, and then we'll see who the stupid one is. About 6 years later, after I had graduated from graduate school and I had written my first book, I hired that teacher. He didn't remember, but I did. He was still working at the same college, teaching the same class the same way over and over again. And I knew he was living beyond his means, so I said, could you use some extra money? He went, yeah. And I said, here's a manuscript. I want you to go through and spell all the words right and put it in nice, neat handwriting. And he said, why don't you have somebody type it? And I said, well, I will once you have it in neat handwriting and spelled well. And he said, that sounds idiotic. And I said, close. But then, see, they told me The Structure of Magic, which, by the way, was not my first book, but The Structure of Magic was my thesis in college. And they told me when I sent it to publishing companies that no one would find it interesting. And they had it reviewed by experts in the field, guys like Jay Haley, who said, you know, therapists would find no use for this. No one will have interest in this person's work. And obviously you haven't read Gregory Bateson, who ended up writing the introduction to it. It was kind of a coincidence because Gregory moved in across the driveway from me. At the same time, I got the letter from Jay Haley, his student, saying no one would find any interest. So I just walked over and gave the manuscript to Gregory. I said, will you give it a read and tell me what you think? And I'd always appreciated Gregory's work. And he kind of had to because I was his landlord. You know, I didn't rent the house out, but I did collect the rent. And every once in a while, I kicked people out for not writing introductions. At least he was a little worried about that. And Gregory was an Englishman, you know. He was a very famous guy over here. He was the guy that analyzed all the Nazi films, and he's the guy that developed the double-bind theory of schizophrenia, which is a brilliant piece of work. But Gregory loved The Structure of Magic. He thought it was brilliant. In fact, he's the guy that told me that I should go meet Milton Erickson. And I went, who's Milton Erickson? I never even heard of him. And he said, he's a hypnotist. He said, I sent people down to try and figure out what he was doing, and nobody could even remember being there. And I said, woo, that sounds good. Sounds like my kind of guy.